hold up, but it's not going to feel very pleasant. First thing Friday morning, wet and windy weather, some heavy bursts of rain, the M3, the M2, not very pleasant in the morning, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. The winds will steadily ease, but the rain is likely to linger over parts of southwest England, and we have a yellow warning in place for that. Some heavy showers for parts of the Midlands, southeast England and East Anglia. Not too many showers further north, generally a dry day with some sunny spells in the west. Quite a lot of low cloud and mist with an easterly breeze on those North Sea coasts. Going to feel quite a lot colder here tomorrow compared to today. And certainly feeling pretty chilly with the wind and the rain further south. The wind continues to ease down, but notice this finger of rain lingering as we head into the weekend over parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, pushing into parts of southwest Scotland and perhaps into the Midlands. The low cloud and mist likely to cling to many eastern coastal counties as well. In between, there'll be some brighter spells on Saturday, and the winds should be a lot lighter in the south. Generally a slightly cooler feel as well, with temperatures mostly 9 to 13 degrees Celsius. That's all for now. Goodbye.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Net Zero. If you like those two words, you'll be very happy tonight because after being taken to court, the government has issued a lot more detail. I think there's about 1,000 pages of it, all about net zero and how on earth we're actually going to get there. It's got me thinking after it was criticised that apparently it removes the UK's standing as a leader when it comes to climate change. Why is it our job to lead on this issue? And what about if you're one of those that are a little bit sceptical and perhaps can't even afford some of these measures? Should we be able to opt out if we want to or not? And shoplifting, are you partial to a bit of it? Yes, you. Perhaps you don't scan pretty much everything that goes through your self-checkout. If so, I'm talking to you because the UK is now apparently the worst in Europe when it comes to this issue. Many people saying it needs to be taken more seriously. Does it? I mean, when you look at the fact we've got so many crimes now, where is shoplifting on the list? And how much would you actually expect a store assistant, who often gets minimum wage, by the way, to put themselves in the way of it? Your thoughts on that? And a topic which one of my panellists tonight has told me I shouldn't be focusing on because, in his words, there's more important things going on. Well, I beg to differ. We have a generation of children that are being fed a very dangerous ideological nonsense, which, if you ask me, is setting them up to a mental health failure. And parents are being excluded from the goings-on at the schools when it comes to the matter. So ignore it, not on my watch, thank you very much. We'll have it all and more in just a few minutes after we've brought ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines, brought to you by Polly Middlehurst.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. The White House has, within the last hour, issued a statement saying that US citizens residing in or travelling to Russia should depart immediately. They also say the targeting of American citizens by the Russian government is unacceptable. That comes as an American reporter working for the Wall Street Journal has been arrested in Russia on suspicion of spying for Washington. Evan Gershkovich pleaded not guilty during his court appearance, according to state-owned media. But the court ruled Gershkovich could be held in custody until the end of May. Also in the news today, a man has been found guilty of the murder of a 9-year-old girl who was shot in Liverpool last year. Olivia Pratt-Corbell was murdered in her own home last August, and her mother was also injured in the attack. Merseyside Police has released CCTV footage of the moment Thomas Cashman chased a convicted drug dealer towards Miss Corbell's home. Olivia was killed just moments later. The jury at Manchester Crown Court also found the 34-year-old guilty of the attempted murder of Joseph Nee. And the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, Serena Kennedy, said the investigation is still ongoing.
Brought the person responsible for Olivia's murder, Thomas Cashman, to justice. I know that will never bring Olivia back, but hopefully the family will get some small comfort in knowing the person that took their daughter away from them is now behind bars. We are still hunting down those people who enabled that murder to take place, who supplied the gun, where the gun is, and we will carry on until we identify those people responsible.
King Charles visited a NATO military base during his historic state visit to Germany today. King Charles met with the deputy head of the German-British Battalion and other military personnel from the unit. He also spoke with Ukrainian refugees, telling them, "I'm praying for you," as he condemned what he called the unimaginable suffering caused by Russia's invasion of their homeland. Well, earlier, King Charles became the first British monarch to address the German Parliament. Speaking to politicians in both English and German, he celebrated the special bond between the two countries.
The United Kingdom and Germany are together providing leadership to secure our shared future. Today, the United Kingdom and Germany are Europe's two largest producers of power from offshore wind. These innovations are vital in combating the existential challenge of climate change and global warming, which confronts us all.
His Majesty the King. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has announced his party will freeze council tax bills this year. He unveiled the pledge at the launch of Labour's local election campaign in Swindon. The move will be funded, he says, by a windfall tax on the profits of oil and gas companies.
Labour would freeze council tax next year using that windfall tax that hasn't been collected. Yes, you heard it right. Not a penny more on your council tax, not a penny more than the bill you paid last year. And that is a tax cut for the 99% of working people, compared with the tax cut for the richest 1% that we get under the Tories.
Police say 2 men who were shot dead in Cambridgeshire last night were father and son. The force has arrested 3 people on suspicion of conspiracy to murder, saying the incidents, which happened in Sutton and Bluntisham, were linked and targeted. The force has also recovered a firearm and is now working to establish whether it was legally owned. The notorious prisoner Charles Bronson has lost a parole board bid to be freed from jail. Bronson, who changed his surname to Salvador in 2014, is one of the longest-serving prisoners in UK history. The parole board said it wasn't satisfied that Mr Salvador was suitable for release. Jailed when he was 22 years old, he spent most of the last 48 years in isolation while in custody. And his son, George Bambi, told GB News earlier they have accepted the decision. The Duke of Sussex has left the High Court in London as the final day of the privacy hearing against the Daily Mail publisher comes to an end. Harry and other celebrities, including Sir Elton John, have accused associated newspapers of unlawfully gathering their private information. The publisher denies the allegations and says the legal challenges have been brought far too late. And lastly, 9 people have been killed in a crash involving 2 Army helicopters in the United States. The vehicles were attending a routine training mission over the state of Kentucky. They were operated by the 101st Airborne Division with 5 soldiers on one helicopter and 4 on the other. That's the news. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Michelle.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm Michelle Dewbs and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Keeping me company in the studio, what a treat for me. Daniel Moylan is the Tory life peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig is the director. Well, you're not the director, it's the director. You're more than director, you're the founder, CEO
I am, Michelle. I have
of PLMR
a lovely business
Communication.
full of great people.
Good job I pay attention, isn't it, and not just read.
Thank you.
Good. Matt says, Michelle, I love your energy and enthusiasm today. Well, I'm really pleased you picked up on that, because I've got to say I'm not feeling very well at all. I can't wait to go to bed. I've got a really bad headache.
Sorry.
So I'm hiding it well. Oh, I was until I told you all about it. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us 3 here. It's very much about you at home as well. What do you make to the goings-on of the day? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. Did you see in the headlines just then, by the way, that Charles Bronson, he's not going out of prison anytime soon? Do you think that's the right decision? There'll be some people at home that sit there and be shouting at your screens, he should be out by now. People can rehabilitate themselves. Are you one of them? Or do you think the country's a little bit safer with him still behind bars? And all that weird going-ons, by the way. Have you seen all that about his son that's not even really his son? All a bit odd, if you ask me. Anyway, give me your thoughts. That's the email address on the screen, as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk is how you can get hold of me. Now, if you're someone that's into the whole net zero thing, today is an exciting day for you. I hope you've cancelled all your plans for tonight and perhaps even into the weekend too, because lots of plans have come out today. Apparently, it's an energy revolution. It's going to power up Britain. There's about 1,000 pages of this kind of content, so I must confess I've not read all 1,000 pages, but I will. It's definitely on my list. This has all come about because there was a High Court challenge, essentially, which said that the government wasn't really giving enough detail into a lot of its plans. Well, detail we have. It's got lots of different measures in them. Your thoughts on it overall, Daniel?
Well, I think that, it depends what you're trying to aim at. If you want cheap and abundant energy that is secure, which is what I think most people want for their families, then this isn't quite the place to look. This is a plan for how we're going to get to net zero, and the energy costs are going to be higher. At the moment, the security is still very, very unclear, because It's true you can have lots of wind farms and lots of solar, but when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, you need a huge amount of backup electricity supply, maybe in batteries, maybe in hydroelectric, to back it up. And we haven't seen, I think, enough detail on that.
Have you read all the 1,000 pages yet?
No, I'm proud to say I've not read all the 1,000 pages. I'm in your place, Elaine.
Elaine?
Michelle. Oh, my God, Michelle.
Right, that's it, I'm going.
I'm
Elaine.
tired as well. I'm in the same place as you, Michelle.
Elaine. I've never been called Elaine in all my life.
I have set aside for the Easter holidays. I can't think of
Have you? Is that what you're going to be doing over your Easter holidays?
That is what I will be doing over my Easter holidays.
Well,
in a
I'll
couple of
quiz
weeks'
you.
time, when I'm back here, you'll be able to quiz me
I will.
on all the detail.
I will. I am sitting here now. I should be thinking about net zero, but I'm wondering who is the Elaine that's on Daniel's mind. You'll have to tell me in the break who this new lady is.
I'm not saying it on air.
I think
Kevin.
he's tired, Michelle. You know, he's been very busy this week rebelling in the House of Lords and voting against his own government.
Well,
Rebel Moylan.
Proud of that.
Rebel
That's the history
Moylan.
books. I'm in the history books now. I voted against the Windsor Framework.
When you vote against your party, do you get any stick for it from the party? Or
No,
not?
they're charming.
Do people not talk to you for about a week?
Conservatives are lovely. They're absolutely lovely. They'd never do a thing like that.
But you seriously
It's
don't get any
only
stick?
in the Labour Party, where if they don't agree with you, like poor Jeremy Corbyn, they ban you after a lifetime of service to the party. They ban you from being even applying to be a candidate. That's the viciousness you see when you go amongst socialists. You'd never get that amongst Tories.
Why I was worried, Michelle, about Daniel calling you Elaine is that because what happens in the House of Commons is all the Tory MPs start roughing each other up and having scuffles and fights.
What are you on about, into the lobbies?
That's right, like we saw last year. So I was worried that Daniel might have been roughed up for voting against Rishi, but apparently not.
I saw the claims. Can't remember what was the vote. What was the vote? It was the Brexit one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they said that they're being manhandled. If that is their definition of manhandled, they need to get themselves out on a night out in Hull. They wouldn't know what had hit them if that's their definition of it. Anyway, I massively digress. Go on, net zero.
Well, I just think today is quite important. It's an attempt by Daniel's party to try and move us on. There are some. I haven't read all 1,000 pages. I've read some detailed summaries. So some of it's very good. It's moving things in the right direction in terms of better insulation of homes. However, there's nothing in there about us being able to produce more onshore wind in our country. And it's very interesting what Daniel just said about when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. But earlier today, over half the power being consumed in the UK was coming from renewables. Isn't that remarkable?
No.
No?
It's not remarkable because today was
a
the day when the sun was shining, and and was quite blustery. So this is if the best you can do is get half on a day like this, then you've got a long way to go just on that side of it. But my point, Kevin, isn't that. Of course you can build enough wind farms and you can put down enough solar, even at the cost of food production. You can build the wind farms and solar, and if you build enough, you will produce, on a sunny, windy day, you will produce enough electricity and more than you need. The question is, when they're not working, you have to have, for every wind farm, you have to have either a huge battery farm, which has been charged up, ready to take over, or you have to have some sort of hydroelectric arrangement ready to run, again, charged up with the spare electricity you know. Now, that all has to be costed in. We need to know what the detail of all that is, and it all has to be costed in. And that is part of the cost of renewables. And that hasn't been counted, as far as I'm aware, when the government tells you what your wind energy and your solar energy is costing. Because at the moment, we use gas to back it up when it's not blowing.
OK, so the alternative point of view is that today doesn't go far enough because it doesn't go strongly enough in offering more incentives to renewable companies to be able to provide us with more of our power. Now, Daniel's just raised his eyebrows, OK? But I think it's exciting and great that today our nation's half of our power is being produced by renewables, and our country needs more jobs and employment. And if we really get a hold of the renewable energy agenda, we can do that. So in summary from today, some good things in there, but we are in danger of falling behind America and the EU if we don't, move even faster. And it's about the climate and the environment, but also good British jobs.
Right, so you've hit on a really interesting point because there's been loads of criticism, right, about these plans today, lots. But there was one in particular that caught my eye. He's not alone in this criticism, by the way. This is Dr. Chris Jones, an expert in climate change at the University of Manchester. He said, among other things, he's basically saying it's a weak strategy. But his last line of it was interesting because it said, these measures are enough to downgrade the UK's role as a leader in tackling climate change. You've just said then, oh, it might make us fall behind the EU and the US, etc. Why does the UK have to be the one that's driving this forward? There'll be people at home that really are struggling. People wheel out this sentence all the time, heating or eating, whatever. Yep. You're going to have a lot of measures that are coming down the pike that are going to be very expensive for people, whether it's changing cars or sticking heat pumps wherever. God only knows what you need to do to tick the boxes. Why do we have to be so front-footed? Why can't we chill out a little bit?
Well, you are right that if it was just for the sake of it, it wouldn't matter what others did. But when I said falling behind, I mean in terms of the amount of active state investment that the US and the EU is putting into their countries to have a...
You mean job creation?
Job creation, public investment. If I could just finish one second.
Out of your pocket.
1 second.
Let him finish
1 second, then you
point.
can come back, Daniel. I think that we're in danger of falling behind. Active public sector investment to create good jobs. You're absolutely right, not for the sake of it. That wouldn't mean anything. But this is about the jobs that we need in this country and the opportunities of really being a world leader. Not for the sake of it, but for jobs, the economy, as well as protecting the environment.
When he talks about good jobs, the best jobs don't need subsidy. The best jobs are the jobs where people are creating value that pays their wages and a profit. Jobs that need a subsidy are not the best jobs.
But one of the other critiques from today's announcement is that the subsidies available to oil and gas companies for investment and offsetting some of their tax against investment, there isn't a level playing field between what oil and gas companies can claim and renewables, and that's a missed opportunity.
Well, no, it's because if you do an oil field, you have to spend a vast fortune, first of all, before you get a drop out of it. And that's why you can offset those against your profits in the future, because you have to make that huge investment right at the outset. With wind farms, you also have to invest, obviously. You have to invest. But it's not one huge thing, because each tower, each pylon that goes up with its windmill on it...
That's the technical term.
That's a technical term.
Thank you.
Windmill, it's a technical term, goes round like a windmill. Each one can start producing electricity straight away. So you're bound to have a different tax treatment because the oil and gas wells don't make any profits until they're actually dug. Platforms up, rigs, the whole thing, it's a huge investment.
Do you, are you sitting at home and you think about net zero and, yeah, it sounds good, doesn't it? Yeah, let's all help save the planet. It sounds great. But when you actually look at the impact, like the micro, this is not just like a pie-in-the-sky thing, the micro level of impact it has on your lives. You know, there's councils going meat-free. You can't eat meat, that's bad for the environment. You've got all of this war on cars going on. So much now is happening to all of our lives, all in this pursuit of net zero. Is it worth it? Is it a price worth paying? I know what you're saying about good jobs, by the way, because a few of my family members work at Siemens. I think I'm allowed to say that. They work at Siemens and they're involved with the whole turbines. And yes, for an area that's not doing so well, that hasn't had its previous industry replaced, when green opportunities come along, they are interesting, they are engaging.
Sensational company.
Yeah, but I just, sometimes, I'm not going to open up the whole COVID thing, don't worry, but sometimes, like, we shut the whole economy down specifically just to focus on COVID, and sometimes with this climate net zero stuff, I worry that we're impacting so many people's lives in so many ways in the pursuit of net zero, as though it's the only thing that matters. Do you think that at home? Am I talking out of bits that I shouldn't be talking out of? What do you think? Adrian says, Michelle, the House of Parliament, they're getting refurbed at the moment. Will they be leading the way, fitting their whole estate with heat pumps? Do you know the answer to that?
I don't know the answer because they're not leading the way. They're miles behind in terms of what they're going to do, and they've had to start all over again, and it'll be years before you see anything happen. And by then, we'll probably have gone beyond heat pumps.
Stuart is a details man. He's saying, can you ask Kevin, this 50% that's been talked about, is it total energy or just electricity, which isn't all of our energy? I don't know. Do you know?
The stat I was referring to was that earlier today, almost half of the electricity consumption in our country.
Electricity.
Was being,
there you go. Stuart is the man that knows the answer to the detail. We like that. Get in touch. I mean, a couple of you are making the same point here, which is, Michelle, this is all fascinating, but it means nothing if people are not getting themselves over to China, for example, and having a word with those guys. And by the way, when you say about China, because indeed you're right, they are emitting a lot more than us, but don't forget, we do a lot of the outsourcing of our manufacturing to China. So if you want them to cut their emissions, would you be happy if they turned around in my little hypothetical world and said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll reduce emissions by stopping doing the manufacturing for lots of the globe. You can bring your manufacturing back into this country and you can pay the higher prices. Would you be happy with that solution? Your thoughts? I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have a lot of your responses. You guys are getting in touch on this one, but I also want to talk to you about shoplifting. When you think about shoplifting, do you think it's a serious issue? Apparently, we're the worst in the whole of Europe for that matter. And many people are saying it's time to get tough on it. But I don't mean to be rude to shops. There's an awful lot of crime right now. Where is shoplifting in the pecking order? You give me your thoughts. I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Jubilee, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Jubilee, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Jubilee, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Daniel Moylan is the Conservative life payer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig is the CEO of PLMR Communications, and I'm Elaine, and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock with these
Sorry,
two.
Michelle.
I never got to the bottom of who Elaine was, by the way. He's giving nothing away. He's keeping a dignified silence. Kevin says, can you ask Kevin So 2 Kevins. Can you challenge him on that percentage of energy being generated by renewables? That is the percentage of electricity that is being generated, not gas. As gas makes up 80% of the energy, 50% renewables would equate to 10% of the total energy.
Well, I would just say to Kev that about 1 o'clock today, from the national grid, they gave me a quote on the real-time power mix, of which renewables were 48.1%, gas 17%, biomass 3.9%, imports 14.9%, and nuclear at 16%, and 0% coal, which is great.
But there you go.
That was electricity.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, not total power.
Right.
You have gas pumped into your boiler. That's not.
I've got another question for you. Can you ask Kevin? If you've got any questions for Daniel, let me know as well. Just I don't want Daniel to be left out with your questioning from home. Can you ask Kevin if he's so in favour of net zero? Has he got a heat pump? Has he got solar panels? And does he drive an electric car?
Thank you for the question. Who's that from?
He's called Straight Talker on Twitter.
Well, thanks, Straight Talker. I do have an electric car. I don't have the heat pumps, from my experience, are in quite grand houses so far in the countryside. I think you've got to go down quite a way to get them. But if I could, I would, you know.
So that's not a real good showing, that,
well,
is it? It's not 100% of the measures. Let's put it that way.
I think we should all do what we can.
Yeah, I think that we must all do what we can, but I think that the people that bang the drum the loudest for the net zero stuff should do more.
Yeah.
I think they should lead by example.
Like you, Kevin.
Yeah, example.
Well, can I say there's one... I tell you, there's an important quote, though, and the viewers are a smart bunch, and it's something that Ed Miliband says a lot. It's really important we think about the end of the world and looking after the planet, but it has to be done at the same time as thinking about the end of the month, right?
This is a very good point.
And that is part of all this. You know, lives have to be led and budgets met in the meantime.
This is very true. Right, so let's move on, shall we? We've all heard Britain being called a nation of shopkeepers. Daniel's shaking his head, but I'm going to move on from net zero because there's other things going on. Right, we've all been called, haven't we, a nation of shopkeepers, but we're wondering now, are we basically a nation of shoplifters? According to official statistics, shoplifting has increased by 21%, and attacks on shopkeepers has also risen dramatically. I think a lot of people are inadvertent shoplifters. I think what people do...
Didn't you admit before on a programme that you shoplifted in the past? Did I imagine that?
In life, you've got to be sensible. And I don't think it's sensible to admit to being a criminal live on television. So I will say no comment to that one.
Okay.
What I'm saying is I think there's a lot of people that perhaps look at a self-checkout and think to themselves, it's done away with all of its checkout girls, people like me. So if you want me to serve myself, well, you can't really grumble if you don't get your entire amount through the till.
I think there's some people like that. Shoplifting. That is shoplifting.
I think there's a lot of people out there.
I mean, inadvertent would be
you inadvertently put an orange through as a grapefruit.
Yeah, exactly. You put an orange through as a grapefruit, or
because a grapefruit. No, you do it the other way around. You'd put your grapefruit through as an orange.
Yeah,
because
the colours look the same. But
should we move it on because Michelle's looking slightly uncomfortable?
Yeah, I'm looking a bit shifty sitting here. If you're listening,
what I know Michelle hasn't done, something I see happening a lot now, and because this shoplifting does worry me. Yeah. But something else that's happening is that a whole load of people nowadays, of course, have deliveries from Amazon and other firms delivered to their door. They're not at home. They have their little boxes, they have their little hidden places where they tell the driver to leave the stuff. Yeah. There are people who are professionally going around now, going down to basements, going into flats and stealing stuff that's been left out just to see what it is, see if it's got any value for them, take it off and sell it. And it's become a whole industry, and I don't see that the police are going to be able to do anything about it because you'd have to be everywhere to stop.
And they've got better things to do.
And they've got better things to do. So I don't know what the solution to that is. At least with shoplifting, the big shops at least can install cameras. They can have checkout. When you take your orange and your grapefruit out and the machine goes flash, flash, or whatever, and buzz. It never has to me, so I assume it does.
And they have cameras at self-checkouts now,
and they have cameras. Oh, yes, they have cameras at have had for years. They have cameras at checkout so they can see your hands, see what you're doing with all the flippity-flop there in front of you, and so on. So they can look after themselves to some extent. But I'm worried about ordinary people who are having stuff nicked from them the whole time people trying to get into blocks of flats, see what's been left there by the drivers.
Shoplifting costs the British economy £4.27 billion, apparently. That's more than Germany, France, the Netherlands, Spain, Italy and Sweden. Only retailers in the United States, apparently, face more theft. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shocking
Stop trying to get me
statistic.
arrested
It's a shocking statistic, and I think the issue here is that I feel, and statistics suggest it, that it's on the rise. The reality that we all know is if you are somebody on, relatively low wages working as security in, for example, Sainsbury's, right? You're going to think twice about risking your well-being to tackle somebody for shoplifting, right? So it is a huge cost. Generally, I think if it's on the rise, it's part of the cost of living crisis. People are harder up. They're probably going to commit more crime as a result. Well, hang on. But the other thing is, overall, crime is on the rise, and there is, I detect, less respect around for law and order than there used to be, and this is part of the problem. But low-paid security guards in an increasingly violent society are not going to risk their lives to tackle shoplifters.
That isn't how it works.
But it is. You can see that all around the place.
It isn't how it works in large organisations. So you have staff on London Underground, for example, who look after the stations. You see them there. But they're not the people who tackle fare dodgers, for example. There are dedicated officers, revenue protection officers, dressed in ordinary clothes who work in pairs, who do tackle fare dodgers and are prepared and trained to take people on. I don't mean to rugby tackle them. They're not encouraged to get into fights, but to confront them and be firm with them. And you have the same sort of thing in shops. You think it's the poor security guard whose job it is. It isn't. There are people, they organise this in a much, much more focused way. Your ordinary security guard is not the one who will be going and tackling the shoplifter if the buzzer goes off. So the big shops can generally look after themselves. I worry about the small shops and I worry about the attacks on small shopkeepers. They're very often on small shopkeepers because they haven't got the same resources and they're not as professional at doing it as the big shops are, despite what Kevin thinks they're a bunch of amateurs. They're not. They're very professional about it. They know what they're doing. And I worry about them, and I worry about people getting stuff nicked at home the whole time and break-ins from outside their homes or in their little alcoves and whatever. Hide it behind put it behind the flower pot. Well,
lots of your responses at home are making me chuckle. I do see all your emails that you send to me, and I have to be sensible that I can't read certain things out, especially before the watershed. I think that as a nation, people are becoming more violent. It feels like that to me anyway. And I also think that social media is playing a big part in this because you do seem to see these videos now of these kids and they don't care. They will just walk into a shop in front of everyone. They'll fill their boots, they'll fill their pockets, and they will just wander out knowing that they're probably not going to get stopped. And a lot of shoplifters, I know a little bit too much about this subject, a lot of shoplifters, of course, they do steal to order, don't they?
Yes, things like alcohol, they are in larger stores, that does happen. And I don't know where Lord Daniel Moylan does his weekly shop, but I can assure him that in many, many supermarkets, large and small, around the country, it does fall to the security staff as the first port of call to tackle shoplifters.
Well, I wouldn't know myself, because I've never actually been stopped for shoplifting, Kevin, and you'd have maybe more experience than me in this.
I suspect neither of you
But I can
have.
assure you that Sainsbury's and people like that have got a very much more professional operation than you think.
Sheila says, Michelle, shoplifting causes a price rise in goods which ultimately affects us all. It is a crime and it needs to be stopped.
Correct.
I completely agree with you. It is a crime and it does need to be stopped. But this country, when it comes to law and order, is in an absolute mess. So when it comes to the priorities of the police, do you think it is stuff like stopping shoplifters that should get the priority when you've got so many other people seemingly getting away with quite serious crimes these days? I don't know. You give me your thoughts on all of that. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your emails, but I also want to ask you this about schools. One of my panel, you can guess which one I suspect, he says I shouldn't even be debating this next topic because he doesn't think it's that much of a big deal and he thinks there's other things to be worrying about in this country. But I beg to differ. I think there's too much stuff going on at schools these days without the consent and knowledge of parents. I worry that parents are almost being alienated from key decisions and things that potentially could impact children for the rest of their lives. I'll tell you what I'm talking about in just 2 minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. I've got alongside me Lord Daniel Moylan and Kevin Craig. Welcome back to all of you. We've just been talking, in case you've missed it. Some of you have been sending me jokes, actually. Again, I can't read them out on television, so thank you for that. But no. Martin says, if all shoplifting stopped overnight, I guarantee it wouldn't make a scrap of difference to the price of goods. That's in response to the comment from one of my viewers a second ago, which says that the rise in shoplifting is affecting everyone because the shops are clawing back their prices, the losses through priced increases.
That's quite right.
Are you a security guard? Anyone out there? If you are, would you get involved? Would you jump in and try and stop someone stealing anything? Daniel says no, would you?
No, my dad was a security guard.
It's not your job.
No, why would you?
It's not your job.
It ends up in a nice letter from the chief executive at your funeral service.
Yes, like people say, I used to be the Deputy Chairman of Transport for London, people say, why don't the bus drivers stop people getting on the bus without paying? Because it's not their job. They're not paid to get out of the cab and go and have a punch-up with people. There are revenue protection officers there to do that who are trained for it.
And I admire the people. You see sometimes very selfless acts of bravery to try and stop crime, but people are rightly reticent, I think, now, because it could escalate very quickly.
Yeah, it's a shame in society because I don't like people. You see it all on social media, don't you? People filming all, like, crazy, awful goings-on. You think, why are you stood there and filming it? Why? You're helping the guy or the girl, whatever it is. And then at the same time, I question myself, because I've always thought if I saw anything, I would get straight in there. But now that I've got a child, I think, actually, my priority is getting home safely to my child.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We've digressed from shoplifting into have a go heroes. Don't quite know how I've done that. But anyway, I will move on. A story that really caught my eye today. It was a report out called Asleep at the Wheel. And what it is conducted by, I think, a think tank called Policy Exchange, and they're looking at schools and their gender policies, and it's all looking at whether or not children, you know, they have all this stuff these days where they think they can change their gender and they're out of touch with their biological sex and all this and all that and all the other. Anyway, 40% apparently of secondary schools that have questioned this would say that they're not going to divulge to the parents of the child if they've got a situation where the children is questioning their gender and going through all this process. I personally found that appalling. Kevin, it's you on my panel that says, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but haven't you got anything better to talk about, Michelle? Why are you making this more than it is? I think this is a really serious issue. I worry for the mental health of a generation of children to come. I think that they've been indulged and often promoted this fantasy, and I don't think it's going to end well. And I think it's hugely important, hence I'm discussing it.
OK. So, you know, earlier on I was fronted up and asked to give stats about what I believed on energy policy, right? Can somebody tell me how many incidences across the country we are talking about each year?
Of what?
Issues where a child with issues about with trans-related or gender-related issues, something happened and their parents weren't told. What's the scale of this problem?
Well,
it dominates the airwaves.
First and foremost, if the parents haven't been told about it, I suspect that getting actual stats on it will be quite difficult. But the stats that I just gave you then, which is 40% of the secondary schools that have responded to this research thing, have said that they would not, they proactively wouldn't tell the parents. Some of them cite things like the Data Protection Act, which is just wrong, because if a child is in danger or you have concerns about the well-being of the child, you should be telling parents or whoever. You talk about stats as well. When it looks at, I think, what do they call it, the GIDS, you know, like the Tavistock stuff, referrals to those guys are up thousands of fold. So this, for me, as a mum that has a little one in nursery, is really concerning. I don't want my child being told, you know, oh, you think you're a boy, you think you're a girl, oh, you can do this, we'll call you Shirley, we won't tell you, Mum. It's worrying to me as a parent.
Well, I'm also a parent, and I ultimately echo the head teachers who call for renewed government guidance on this to clarify it. But my point is, we're talking so much about trans-related issues, the gender-related debates, you know, the noise around it. When my point, which I still hold, is relative to the other crises in schools. Under-attainment, violence against fellow pupils and teachers. Why are we not talking about that as much?
Because Keir Starmer...
You're struggling with names today,
because
Daniel.
Because Keir Starmer still won't tell you whether a woman is a woman. Because your party, the party you've come on here to front for, cannot say what a woman is.
Yes, they can. Biologically born female. Ask
it's changed
Reid.
now.
No, it's not changed. It's really clear.
It's changed
and
now.
the problem,
so
Rebel Moylan...
It's become clear.
No.
So there's a serious point in all of this, which is the role of the parent is it's the parent's job, morally and legally, to educate and bring up their children. The schools are only there to assist in that and to facilitate it. The schools are not the parents of the children, and they shouldn't be making decisions contrary to what the parents actually want. And the parents need to be involved in making decisions about their children at every stage, at every level, because they've got the moral and legal responsibility for educating them and for bringing them up. And we've lost sight of that principle. We seem to think that these poor kids actually belong to the state. We even had in Scotland, this is not an anti-Labour point because it was SNP, this new First Minister of Scotland, when he was Health Minister, he tried effectively to nationalise all the children in Scotland by giving every one of them a civil servant as a corporate co-parent. You know, that is just completely the wrong direction.
On your side of the fence, Baroness Morris, who is the Secretary of State for Education under Blair, she has endorsed this report today, saying safeguarding principles are fundamental to a responsible society. This report demonstrates an incompatibility between current practice for gender-distressed children and well-established and universally accepted safeguarding principles. Children deserve to be kept safe and action is now urgent, she says.
Yeah, you see, Estelle Moore, a great former Labour Secretary of State, I agree. I don't disagree on the policy that we need clarity and the importance of parental involvement. But my broader point, which is why I think it's important to say it, the amount of noise and chit-chat around these trans-related, gender-related issues, the reason you and your party, Daniel, like to talk about it so much more, if I can finish, is that it gives Rishi something to talk about to distract from the abject failure. I didn't interrupt you, Daniel, in so many areas, you know, and so that's why this is like, there are much bigger crises and problems in our schools.
Right. I'm sure there are problems elsewhere in society, but a number of people, including on the left, have pushed this whole thing very hard over the last 5, 6, 10 years. It's grown hugely, that you have the right to determine what they call gender, your own gender, which is a thing they've invented, a whole idea they've invented, and you've got the right to push it. And they've so pushed this so far that you actually have Keir Starmer not able to tell what the answer to the question is.
I keep telling you every week you can if you ask him.
Well, he's probably been briefed up to the eyeballs by PR people who have realised this is damaging political for the Labour Party.
Yeah, because it brought down Sturgeon.
Point of the matter is, you don't think I should talk about this.
Important.
I make no apology whatsoever for talking about this. I am sick and tired of children being fed these narratives that have real-world impacts. You've got children, girls, binding their chests. You've got the hormones being pumped into children to suppress puberty. You've got safe spaces being, eroded all over the place. You've got all of this nonsense about self-ID that people now have to be able to say who they are, that they think they are, with facts seemingly not mattering. Law enforcement bodies, as I discussed the other day, getting a hold of this. It's nonsense. It needs to stop. Children should absolutely be kept safe. Parents should always be kept in the loop. And I'm sorry, I don't care what, with respect, I don't care that you think I shouldn't be discussing it, and I make no apology for it, and I will definitely be discussing it again in the future.
Can I say one thing? Have I got a right reply?
Really quickly, then.
You still haven't answered the question of how many times over a year this happens. No one's arguing with you about parental. You haven't. There's no stats to justify why this channel is banging on all day about an issue that affects a tiny number of people.
Well, we don't bang on about it all day. That's just ridiculous.
No,
and I've just it is. I've just told you as well. 40% of the schools have admitted that they would not tell parents. That shouldn't even be 4%. I'm not having it. The report's called asleep at the wheel. I'm not asleep at the wheel, but I'll tell you what, I am getting in trouble there because I'm not going to my break, because I do want to go to break and I want to come back and talk about your party's local election plan that's been released today. Don't go anywhere, and I'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbs, keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Keeping me company is Daniel, the man that keeps calling me Elaine. Oh, you don't keep doing it.
I did it
you
once.
did it once. It's the viewers that keep doing it. Anyway, alongside him, Kevin Craig is the CEO of PLMR Communications. Lots of you guys getting in touch. I used to be a store detective in Woolworths. Hey, that's a blast from the past. Woolworths, do you remember Woolworths?
I do.
Did you? I bet you didn't. I bet you've never come across a Woolworths in all your life. You're too posh for
I'd
Woolworths.
cleaned the floors in Woolworths when I was 16.
You cleaned the
on
floors
a Saturday.
in
It was a
Woolworths?
Saturday job. I used to work in the stockhouse in Woolworths in New Street in Birmingham, and at the end of the day, I'd come out with my broom and I'd sweep the floors.
Well, I take that back.
You have preconceptions about me, Elaine. Michelle, sorry.
I think you're too posh for Woolworths. The pick and mix in Woolworths used to cost an absolute fortune, too expensive for me. Anyway, the point this guy's making is he used to be a store detective in Woolworths. He says store detective shoplifting has always been an issue. Back in his day, he said he used to try and sort it out. Kevin, don't let him tell you, Michelle, that we don't care about these issues when we do. I won't let him tell me, don't you worry about that. Anyway, we will talk about an issue that perhaps Kevin might care a little bit more about. Local council elections. Keir Starmer, who Daniel also called Kevin today. I don't know what's going on. Keith, yeah, I don't know what's going on.
I think everyone calls him
Keir
Keith.
Starmer. Anyway,
he's ridiculous being named
He's pledged to use an extended windfall tax to freeze council tax for a year. What do you make to all of the goings on his speeches today?
I thought, look, local elections, one of my passions is that not enough people vote in their local council elections in our country. You don't vote.
No, not in local elections. I never have done, no.
Do you abstain actively?
No, just don't bother.
OK, well, I'm disappointed, not for the first time this evening, as
I
something
know,
you've said.
I'll be all right, I'll get over it.
But I think it's really important that people, personally, I think it's important that they vote for their local council elections. Councils have huge amounts of powers. And so today, it's a good speech by Keir and a good policy for the local elections. The interesting thing about the Labour policy today, right, which is about a council tax freeze, Keir Starmer's coming out with policies that 99% of people benefit from, whereas Daniel's man, sometimes Rishi, comes out with policies that the 1% benefit from. It's really simple.
What do you think to this whole council tax thing? It's been mocked a little bit this afternoon.
Kevin talks such complete garbage, but I am going to agree with him on his first point.
Oh, he won't come back. He's not going to come back.
It's really, really important that people do use their vote, including you, at the local elections.
Well said.
But this is complete nonsense, because we don't have to listen to Keith Starmer to find out what Labour government is going to be like, because we've got Labour government already. We've got Labour government in London. We've got Labour government in Wales. In Wales, the council tax is going up by nearly 6%. In London, I had my council tax bill from my local council only last week. My local council is putting the council tax up, their share of the council tax, by 0%. Sadiq Khan, who comes on top of that, is putting his share up by 10%. That is the difference between Conservative and Labour, and that's why we don't need to listen to this nonsense from Keir Starmer. We know what Labour government is like, and it's no good for your pocket.
So that was lovely. We can clip that up tomorrow, and it'll be. And Daniel, he can send that clip to the Tory whips in the House of Lords and say, "I'm a good boy now. I'm back in. I'm behaving, unlike this week in the Lords." When you were involved in government,
I'm telling you, I'd bring my council tax bill.
When you were involved in government in London, working with Boris Johnson, OK, there were increases in things called precept and in charges to Londoners. But basically, you haven't got a single positive thing to say about 13 years of government.
Boris Johnson,
from your own party,
mayor, Boris Johnson had a very rigorous policy.
Yeah, but you're deflecting from this point.
No, deflecting. Boris, you've got this wrong. Boris had a very, very strict policy and a very strict targets for his precept. He even cut it in his last year as mayor. He actually cut the precept. All you get from Labour is increases year on year. Khan's behaviour with his precepts has been a total disgrace.
It's not true. During your time in London, you're saying you never put the precept up?
Right.
Never?
Very moderately, less than...
Now we have it.
We even cut it.
Anyway.
We even cut it.
We're hurtling towards the end of the show. Let me ask you a really direct question, right, before we finish. Right, if Labour is going to do all this and that and the other, right, help me understand this. They have got Wales right in the here and now. So why aren't they using this as their kind of creme de la creme and doing all the things that they reckon they will do if they get elected? Why aren't they doing it now in Wales?
Well, transparency. I'm not an expert on Welsh politics, but what I will say is that the Labour Party has been proving quite popular in elections there. The recent elections for Welsh devolved government, Labour did very well, and people are generally happy with what they're doing. And one thing, because it's about a flowing conversation, Daniel pulls out one local authority. I think it's the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea. Is that right? Okay.
Well, it's the one I happen to live in,
indeed.
And one I sat on and represented.
For an intellectual like you, Daniel, I'm disappointed because councils around the country, Hull, the challenges a council has in Hull, vastly different.
Well, there you go. I'll leave it to you guys to be the judge of that. Jeffrey says, the transphobic narrative from Michelle is appalling. It shouldn't be allowed. I'm not transphobic in any way, shape or form. What I am anti, though, is children being pushed a nonsense based on an ideology, not fact. That's my view, and I'm sure you have a different one, potentially at home. Kevin, that's all I've got time for. Daniel, that's all I've got time for you too. Thank you very much for your feedback tonight. Lots of you saying that you've enjoyed the debates this evening, so you have a fantastic night, all of you, and I will see you tomorrow. Do not forget you've got 1,000 pages of energy policy. Cancel your plans, get it read. We'll test you on it tomorrow. Night-night.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.